Today I want to show you one of my favorite tools that I use to get shots at home here in my YouTube studio mostly, and I use it for product B-roll shots but also lots of other stuff, and that is the PONS PT accessory together with the Zeapon Micro 2 Plus slider. I already did some videos before on the Micro 2 slider and the 2 Plus slider, so you can check them out as well if you want to get more outdoor shots like time lapses etc. with that. But here, because it's actually quite big and heavy, I only use the whole PONS PT system only in my studio, but it's totally fine because you can actually do a lot of great stuff with it, and it also allows to create some effects that really makes your audience wonder like, how did he do that? And that's what I really like about the system. So I would say let's have a closer look at it. The system comes in two parts that you can buy separate. So there's at first the slider at the bottom here, and then there's a PONS PT system at the top. So if you only want to get started with some basic camera slider shots like side-wides, forward, backward, whatever you want to do, then you can only start with the Micro 2 Plus. And then if you want to extend that in the future, then you can also buy the PONS PT system. What the PONS PT system does is it allows you to move the camera around all axes while you're sliding. So I can do panning shots while I'm sliding. I can also tilt the camera up and down, and I can also combine all of that movement together. And now that sounds complicated, but it's actually quite easy because it comes with an app for your phone, both on iOS and also Android. And there you can define waypoints where you can choose any position that you want to, both on the slider and also the PONS PT system at the same time. So all of that works together, and you just define 2 or more waypoints there, then you press play and it automatically moves between those waypoints, and that makes it really, really easy. There are also different modes that you can use it in for time lapses and also for normal camera motion, so you really get everything in the app that you really need. It's quite convenient because you don't even have to touch the slider. You can just use the app and it automatically does everything. But of course, using the app also takes a bit more setup time, like you have to connect it via Bluetooth and then you have to set all the waypoints and so on. And that's also good because if you want to only get some quick shots with it that are a bit easier, then you can also just use the buttons here on the modules. Like here's one button on the slider direct, or 2 buttons, and you also have buttons here on the PONS PT system to move it around there. So if you just want to get some quick motion with it, you can do that without the app too, and I really like that we have both of those options. So much about basic usage of the slider. I will come to different scenarios and how to use it like more in depth in a second, but there's also one downside with the slider. Like it comes in a way that you can't use it straight out of the box because you always need those Sony NP batteries, which is not a big issue because most videographers have those batteries already at home. You also need that for some cinema cameras, you need that for your Atomos Ninja V and lots of other stuff that you might use. So these batteries here, you just plug them in and then it works. And aside from that, what I did here, as you can see, I put a quick release plate on top, or a base plate for a quick release plate, because that makes it a bit easier and faster for me to mount my camera on top. Otherwise you would always have to screw that on. You can also adjust the position here with it, which is great with this wheel. So I would say let's mount a camera on top of it to show you a bit more. It's the A7 III here in that case. As you can see, I can't mount it like that. You have to mount the camera this way, otherwise it wouldn't fit. And if you have one of those shutter release cables for your camera, then you can also connect the camera directly to your slider. I will just do that now. And the reason why you want to do so is because then the slider can actually control your camera. So if you shoot a time lapse, for example, you can set all parameters for the time lapse in the app and it automatically shoots all the photos for you. So then here at the back of the slider, I can connect it to the shutter release port as well, or however it's called, and then we are ready to go. And also it looks a little bit annoying at first because it looks a bit like a gimbal, right? So in the first place when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, do I need to balance anything or stuff like that? But no worries, it does not work like a gimbal. You don't have to balance anything or so, it just stays in one place. You only can put your camera on top and it works, so no calibration, no balancing or anything. You can go straight into shooting. It's far less annoying as it looks like. Let's get a bit more practical by showing you how I actually use this slider. And the first thing that you notice already is that I have this little trolley here that I can move around my room easily. Because if you want to use a tripod, you would need a very heavy duty one, and I don't have such a tripod because it is quite heavy with all the PONS PT stuff on it. Like if you only have the slider, usually even some better travel tripods can work, but it's already critical. But with a PONS PT, forget it, you need a really heavy tripod for it. And important if you put it on a table, especially something like that, is that you want to ensure that it's balanced and it doesn't fall over suddenly, because it actually can happen. First thing that I do to ensure that is here the movable legs. You see that here, like you can move the legs around however you want, and that's really great because otherwise it wouldn't be possible to make it work like that now. Before I do any shooting, I always ensure that it doesn't fall over, or I at least want to figure out at what point it would not be stable anymore. So I can just show you that quickly here. I would hold my hand like that and wait for it. And it does not fall over. Looks scary, I know. So it's important to do this first step. Otherwise you might have some bad surprises. Okay, now the slider is a little bit out of the way, so let's talk about what I actually use it for. And the first one is really hyperlapses. As mentioned before, in the app you can set it to time-lapse mode, which is actually more like a hyperlapse or like a motion time-lapse, because like hyperlapses is usually when you have a lot of motion in there, like you really walk around with your camera during the time-lapse, while time-lapse is completely standing still. And motion time-lapse is what you usually do with sliders, where you have a little bit of slow motion in there. And you can do that here in the app. Like you have the intelligent time-lapse mode and also the normal customized time-lapse mode. That is what I use all the time, and there you can dial in your settings, like how many shots it should take, what your frame rate will be in the final video, etc. And then it calculates everything automatically. Important is, before you start your time-lapse, you should set up your waypoints. I always use just 2 waypoints there. I don't really need more, so A and B, and then I just let it go. And of course, ideally for a time lapse, you use that cable here, and that's the easiest way to shoot time lapses with this slider and the PONS PT, because it like always moves a little step, then it takes a photo, it moves the next step, takes a photo. So it's just 100% control over your time lapse. But if you don't have the cable, or you somehow can't make it work with your camera, then you can also set the slider just to a very slow speed. Like 1% is usually too slow, then it doesn't move anymore at all. But if you set it to somewhere around 5% or so, and then you just shoot a normal video and speed it up in post, you also get a time lapse or a hyper or motion time lapse. That works quite good as well. That was my computer. And aside from hyperlapses or motion time lapses, I also use it a lot for product B-roll shots, because it's really convenient to just put the slider on a table to be able to do so. Then you just put the product there and you slide the slider however you want, and you get all these cool angles. You can also work with macro tubes if you want to, or with a macro lens if you want to get these super nice close-up shots, because getting macro shots out of your hand is actually really complicated, because even if you're at f8 or so, because you're so close to the subject, you only really have to move the camera a little bit forward or backward and it's already out of focus. And obviously with a camera slider like that, that's a lot easier because you have full control over the motion. So that's what I love using the slider for a lot. And especially with the PONS PT module, these product shots come out so much better because you have motion across all axes that makes the shots a lot more interesting. And when it comes to product shots, I also like to do what I call morph shots with it. This is when you have like a camera motion of maybe, let's say, a camera without a lens, and then suddenly the lens gets attached in multiple steps. So it's a bit like stop motion there, but differently, because you basically set your A and B point and then you record the exact same video basically a couple of times, but you put your product always in a different position, or you do some different stuff with the product. Like in the shot that you see right now, I have the lens unattached, and then step by step it gets attached to the camera. So that's like really cool shots that you can do with it, and it's actually quite easy to do. As mentioned, you just record every single step fully, like you always do, the full range of motion. Then later in your video editor, you can just overlay all those clips and cut them at the right place and add like normal crossfade transitions to it, and then you already get this effect. So it's super simple to do actually, but it looks very complicated, and therefore it can really increase the production value of your videos. Especially with this PONS PT, it comes out even better because you can always keep the subject, the product, in the center of the frame, and with only the slider it would just change its position all the time, and it obviously looks better if it stays in the same position always. And another cool shot that you can do with this slider and the PONS PT system is an Inception Shot. So as you can see, I just put the camera now pointing in this direction, like straight with the slider, and now I can get this super cool Inception Shot here by rolling it. Of course, you have to ensure that your camera is placed well, otherwise it could touch the screw here at the bottom. Which it happens a little bit now. I didn't place it completely right, but wasn't too bad. And there you can get the shot. Now you have to imagine if you slide it forward at the same time. That's also really cool if you want to shoot product B-roll, or let's say you have a storytelling shot where you do something and you really want to emphasize that with this inception motion. And that's what I would generally say with this slider. Like you see, you can really move that around all axes however you want to. You can roll it, you can pan it, you can tilt it, and that allows for so many creative shots that I think it's just a must-have in your studio, especially if you shoot product B-roll, but also for other shots. Like when I do my storytelling, sometimes I maybe want to have a shot like you see here right now, where I sit in front of my computer and then the camera moves forward and down, and suddenly you can see how I type on my keyboard, etc. And that would just not be possible, at least not that smooth without a slider. You could use a gimbal for it, but even then you would have a bit more shake, and especially if you're alone, if you don't have anyone that helps you, these sliders and the PONS PT system can help you a lot to get such shots. But you cannot only use the slider for B-roll, you can also use it for interview shots, or like your A-roll shots. So let me see what I mean with that. And the shot that I wanted to show you is what you see right now on this camera. As you can see, the background has this nice parallax effect because the camera is kind of moving around me. And that's the difference between the PONS PT slider and only using the normal slider. Like if you would only use the slider without the PONS PT, then I would constantly move between the left and right corner. So sometimes it would look totally weird because the edge of the frame would just be right in front of my face. It's usually not what you want, and the PONS PT system helps with that because it always keeps me in around the same position now in the frame, and you see the background moving, and I really like this look. And how you do it is simply that you can go into the app and there you define your A and B points. So you always want to ensure that in both points that yourself is in around the same spot, or the person that you want to film. And then in the bottom left corner there is this repeat icon, and by pressing that the slider constantly moves in between those A and B points, going back and forth, so it repeats the motion all the time. And that is how you would use that during an interview, because otherwise if you only do it once then the slider would just stop, and then you would only get this motion one time. So I think it's a super cool shot to spice up your A-roll, especially if you have certain videos where you just can't put B-roll on top all the time. Like then having two cameras is already a huge upgrade, and if you can then also put the second camera on a slider, that makes it look even more interesting. But of course not everything about this slider is good. There are also two small issues that I have to mention here, and the first one is that sometimes the app crashes. It usually happens 1 or 2 times per day for me. That would really be something that Zeapon could improve on, because it's quite annoying when you set your A and B point already and then it crashes and you have to reset everything. And the second is that when you make the slider a little bit faster, at 100% especially, then the motors can get a little bit louder. Right now I use the slider at 70%, so it's not super loud. Like here my microphone, as far as I can tell, doesn't pick it up. It's too quiet for that. But especially if you want to use a microphone directly on your camera while using the slider, it could actually be that it picks that up. So in that case I would always use an external microphone and place it a bit farther away. And little disclaimer, I got this product for free, but I'm not paid to do this video, and Zeapon will also not see the video before it gets live. And there's one more point that I forgot to mention before, which is the travel distance. That is 560 millimeters of this slider. So it's not like super long, but usually for all your studio shots, that's more than enough. And I never had any problems with the length of this slider, just to mention that here as well. Aside from that, it's really a product that I can only recommend, especially if you shoot a lot at home. Then this PONS PT system makes a lot of sense, because it makes lots of your shots a lot more interesting. And it's also great great because you can separate it from the slider. So if you want to get some time lapses or general slider shots on the go, maybe for your travel videos or stuff like that, then you could also bring that on shorter trips, especially if you travel with a car or with a motorbike, and it's no problem really to bring that slider with you. And if you want to know more about that, then check out this video here in the corner where I give you some shot ideas for shots that you can get with this slider when you travel with it. So I hope to see you there, and if you like this video, then please leave me a thumbs up and also consider subscribing for upcoming videos.